here comes Ellie. And Jackie and Chuck. Perfect. Good morning.
Morning, Ellie.
Hey,
Good
Ellie.
morning, everybody.
You're back home.
Yep. For another, I don't know, couple of days, and then we're off again.
You're enjoying this retirement. This is good.
You bet I am.
Excellent. Hey, Jackie. Hey, Chuck.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you guys this morning?
We're okay. We're here. We made it.
Oh, it sounds like there's a story, but I'm just so
No, it's just the usual.
Oh, it's
Got it.
Just...
Hi, Rosie. Haven't seen you in a while.
I know. I've been up in Massachusetts, still here, helping my sister move. So I haven't made it on, but I'm here today. So thank you.
Yay.
All right.
Good to see you.
Here comes Elin. Perfect timing. The chickens are coming home to roost.
Well, the cat's loose, so we're gonna mute ourselves.
Oh, don't mute not on our account. I love the commentary in the background. It's hilarious. Hey, Elin. All right. Well, why don't we start with our prayer? Yesterday in the life of the church was Holy Cross Day, and between that and the content of Mark 6 that we'll be looking at today, I felt that this collect it's actually appointed for the Monday in Holy Week, seemed to be appropriate. So let us pray. Almighty God, whose most dear Son went not up to joy, but first he suffered pain, and entered not into glory before he was crucified, mercifully grant that we, walking in the way of the cross, may find it none other than the way of life and peace. Through Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever.
Amen.
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 Hey, Elin.
I'm sorry. I even came early to my computer. My computer refuses to start up, and I've shut it down. I've just got here Google Workplace. I can't get anything open. So and then the link just disappeared. Oh, wait a minute. Now it's Matterbeats doing something. Anyway, I'm on my cell phone now. So
well, I'm glad that you
to
persisted. I'm sorry about your computer. That's frustrating. Is it a Mac?
Oh, wait, it's just come up. But your email disappeared. So, okay, I'll try again. Okay, sorry to interrupt. Okay.
You're not interrupting at all. You are not interrupting at all. We're just so glad you're here.
I could join a prayer for Elin's computer.
Exactly.
It's the only thing that works.
The resurrection of Elin's computer. Oh, dear.
Okay.
All right. Well, I thought maybe what we would start by doing, and because I mentioned last time that we could come back and revisit, we talked at the end of Mark 5 last week about this classic Mark and Sandwich story. And if you remember, it was the healing of Jairus's daughter, the leader of the synagogue, Jairus being one of the leaders of the synagogue in Capernaum, the healing of his daughter, and in the midst of that is the story of the woman who has had the hemorrhage for 12 years. And then Mark comes back to the raising of Jairus's daughter. And I guess my question is, did anyone have anything else they wanted to say or explore about that? We don't have to go back to that, but I wanted to leave space for it if we did. And I can actually pull that up. Hang on one sec. In front of us. And if there isn't anything more to be said, that's absolutely fine. Going once. Going twice. Okay, well then let's push forward. That's exciting that we can go forward. Okay. So I will just say that last time, um, so that healing took place here in Capernaum, and now we'll have Jesus heading down to his hometown, which of course is Nazareth, right here, and we'll pick up there now. So would someone like to begin? And I will say this about Mark 6, a lot happens in this chapter. Um, and they're familiar stories. So I'll really be guided by you all how much you want to linger on any one of the stories. But there's good stuff here. So would someone like to start with this first paragraph, verses 1 through 6?
I'll do that.
Thank you, Ray.
He left that place and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. On the Sabbath, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astounded. They said, "Where did this man get all this? What is this wisdom that has been given to him? What deeds of power are being done by his hands? Is this not the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters with us?" And they took offense at him. Then Jesus said to them, "Prophets are not without honor, except in their hometown, and among their own kin, and in their own house." And he could do no deed of power there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and cured them. And he was amazed at their unbelief.
Thank you. Well, what do you all hear in that opening salvo?
I hear familiarity breeds contempt.
Amen.
I am reminded of Thanksgiving dinners that stray into politics and religion. Among their own kin and among their own house.
Yep.
What strikes me is that Jesus was actually surprised.
Mm.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lesson for God to learn, that he wouldn't. It's just something that just didn't occur to him, that people would be that human. I mean, they've seen Jesus running around with his no pants on and his nose running, and as a child, and you can't take that kind of that it just doesn't compute.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you said that, Ellie, about him being surprised, because I will confess that, I've read that line so many times and it hasn't really landed before you said that. But, usually it's the disciples or the crowd who are astonished or amazed. And even in the beginning of this same chapter, many who heard him were astounded. I would imagine it takes a lot to surprise Jesus, to amaze Jesus. And so the level of their unbelief, the level of their parochial, provincial cluelessness even got to Jesus. And so I'm so glad you said that. That gave me something to think about.
I think there's some contradiction there, because we get that long series of quotations. Where did this man get all this, down through what deeds of power are being done by his hands? So they're seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
They're hearing what they call wisdom. And then it turns, and there's unbelief.
Mm-hmm.
What happens here?
Mm-hmm. So, yeah. And it seems like the turning point, the linchpin, is this part of verse 3, and they took offense at him.
Yeah.
Why would they take offense at Jesus? Any conjecture there?
Well, I think it's partly because he's one of them. He's got something they don't, and they're jealous, they're contemptful, and they don't understand why he's got all this, and they don't, because he came from them.
Ah, yeah.
Interesting.
If you're one of us, who do you think you are? Interesting. Let's look at the Greek for offense, because it's one of, I love this word. Um, Scandalizo. They were scandalized by him. It sounds kind of salacious. Um, the, the definition to put a stumbling block or impediment. And of course, elsewhere Jesus says, do not cause one of these little ones to stumble. That's really a bad thing if you cause somebody else to stumble on their path. And they were scandalized by Jesus. And then another definition, entice to sin, to cause a person to begin to distrust and desert one whom he ought to trust, fall away. So very interesting word choice there. They were scandalized. They took offense at Jesus.
Patty, the thing that really struck me in this whole thing is the line, and he could do no deed of power there. He could not. And did their offense suck his power out of him? I'm really struggling with that.
Yeah.
Or their lack of belief or trust.
Why wouldn't he overcome that
Yeah.
and be able to do these remarkable things that he could do? They just sucked the life out of him.
Yeah.
Well, although he said in other places for the woman, your faith has cured you, your faith has made you well. So it could be, it is the faith is part of his power.
Mm-hmm. And if that's true, and I think it is, then that says something about it being more of a co-creation than Jesus just coming in and zapping people and suddenly they're well, almost magically. So there's something, there's a dialectic, there's a give and take here. And it seems as though their unbelief is almost like Jesus's kryptonite, right? It's like, okay, that's the thing, that's the shield that is blocking the power, the healing. He laid his hands on a few sick people and cured them, but not big scale, large scale miracle. And so that suggests something about the one on the the ones on the receiving end of that.
I think you look at all his other miracles, and he does them on people who come to him, who at least have made the step toward creating their side of the link of the miracle. And you can't do a miracle if one side is opposed to it. Beautiful. I mean, you just can't make that connection if it's unplugged.
That's a great way to describe it, Ellie.
I'm looking at the joint between verse 2 and verse 3. I mean, he's in the synagogue, he's teaching, opening the scripture to them in a new way. And then they realize who's talking and they have to think about it. And because they reject it because of who's delivering it. Mm-hmm. They get it, they're amazed by it. It sounds right, but oh wait, that can't be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's when the connection snaps.
Yeah, that's the scandal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because it was a teaching. It was his teachings were fine until they realized who was delivering them.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the trust is. The definition that mentions is lost.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Just thinking, poor Mary, she's got 5 sons and God knows how many sisters.
Daughters? Yes.
Daughters, rather, yeah.
Yeah.
Which, I'll just throw out there, our brothers and sisters in the Roman Catholic tradition would continue to argue for the perpetual virginity of Mary. And this sort of argues against that, unless they're children by Joseph, but who knows? Clearly, Jesus is part of a larger community, right? He's networked in this family, which really locates him in in Nazareth and in this village. And so how can you be anything but whom we understand you to be? And when the line or the phrase that gets to me is not this the carpenter? Like so dismissive of that role and that identity for him.
I'm not sure it's carpenters were you
Skilled.
skilled and valued members of the, so but this just this the guy's worked with his hands all his life. What's he doing thinking?
That's what he said.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not a rabbi.
And yeah, so unexpected to them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that they were denigrating carpenters in general, but specifically Jesus as carpenter, because it didn't compute that a carpenter, one who does that kind of manual work, who's an artist, a creator with hands, would be, teaching and unpacking Torah and pronouncing wisdom. So that's all I meant by that.
Although I'll point out my study Bible says other authorities say son of the carpenter and of Mary, and take away the attribution that Jesus is a carpenter.
Yeah. And so there we go again, and that goes back to what we've talked before about textual criticism, that looking at the older copies of the Greek text, it may render it differently. And then, of course, as it goes down through the generations, either it's a textual error or an intentional change that's been made by a scribe or a translation issue. So if it were what John was just saying, son of the carpenter and of Mary, at least that brings Joseph into the story. Because without that, it's like Joseph isn't even part of the equation.
Well, on the other hand, Jesus is 30 and he must have taken up a trade of some sort by that age.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's probably been a carpenter for 15 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'll just say a word about that word that gets translated as carpenter.
Tecton, yeah.
Tecton, exactly. Tectone. Come on. All right. It's just being very slow this morning. There we go. So, yes, it's a woodworker, but as some critics will point out, most of the construction at this time in Palestine would have been stone, not so much wood. But the idea is that Jesus was one who worked with his hands. And you see that it might even apply to a poet or a songwriter, an author. So the idea of him as artist and creator comes out in that Greek word, creator. Anything else there?
I'm wondering. Well, there's only one path to literacy and scholarship, and that's through the temple, through the. I mean, it's not like you can't go off to a college, or
Right.
It's not there. So I'm wondering what he said to them that was perhaps offensive. Did they not like the parables? That's what he was doing. I think in one of the previous chapters, he refers to like an evil and adulterous generation. And I'm wondering if he's getting after them for their breaking of the laws, or what the content is. that is the content offensive
Mm-hmm.
because it's different?
I'm going to switch us over to Luke for just a minute because this is the same uh, scene that we may know pretty well from Luke's gospel. And Luke, who of course is most likely basing his gospel on Mark's gospel, he expounds on this moment a little bit more. He kind of blows it up. When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him. Then he began to say to them, "Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." All spoke well of him and were amazed at the gracious words that came from his mouth. They said, "Is this not Joseph's son?" He said to them, "Doubtless you will quote to me this proverb, 'Doctor, cure yourself.' And you will say, 'Do here also in your hometown the things we've heard you did at Capernaum.'" And he said, "Truly I tell you, no prophet is accepted in the prophet's hometown. But the truth is, there were many widows in Israel in the time of Elijah, when the heaven was shut up 3 years and 6 months, and there was a severe famine over all the land. Yet Elijah was sent to none of them except to a widow at Zarephath in Sidon. There were also many lepers in Israel at the time of the prophet Elisha, and none of them was cleaned except Naaman the Syrian." When they heard this, all in the synagogue were filled with rage. They got up, drove him out of the town, and led him to the brow of the hill on which their town was built, so that they might hurl him off the cliff. But he passed through the midst of them and went on his way. Now, of course, it's not really fair to bring that version of the story into our reading of Mark's gospel. And if it happened kind of like that, that might shed some light on Donna's question about what is it that he said. What do you all think? Any reaction to any of that?
Where did Luke get all those details?
Well, that's another great question, right? Is this poetic license that Luke is taking? There is also, scholars believe, another document that's called Q that Luke was drawing upon in addition to Mark's gospel. So he might have had another stream of source that Mark didn't have access to. Hard to know.
Well, what's clearly consistent, though, is he wasn't performing the miracles in Nazareth that he had been doing elsewhere. And I mean, Luke reads in and they asked him to, "Why aren't you doing it?"
Yeah.
So maybe that at least is some of it.
And if it did happen the way Luke recounts it, when Luke has Jesus talk about Naaman the Syrian and the widow in Sidon. Syria, Sidon, what kind of lands are those?
Pagan.
Yeah.
Pagan.
So that would be offensive if Jesus is saying, there's a reason I'm not doing it here, because you all don't really deserve it, and I'm going to go off and heal Gentiles. That kind of would be reason for them to push him to the edge of the cliff. None of that comes out in Mark's version, which is so short and succinct. But it does make, if we engage in an exercise of imagination, we might think about something about this good news that Jesus is proclaiming is just going to rub them the wrong way. And it might be any notion that they're not living up to God's expectations for them.
Luke's quote from Isaiah was kind of a prophecy of justice, among other things.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not living up to that, that's pretty harsh judgment.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And if they don't believe that the scripture is fulfilled, why isn't it fulfilled? They're offended by the idea that I guess they're being judged because the prophecy already is in effect in the here and now. I mean, God's kingdom is here and now, and they haven't lived up to that. They aren't living into it and not recognizing it.
Mm-hmm. And it also might have something to do with their understanding of who he is, because if he said, Luke, I tell you today this has been fulfilled in your presence. In other words, hello, here I am. And if that doesn't compute for them, that would play in as well. All right, well, why don't we push on to the next scene in this chapter? So Jesus can do no deeds of power except a few small healings, cures, and then off he goes. Would someone like to read this paragraph, the mission of the 12, for us?
I will.
Okay. Can you hold him? I'm going to, my husband will come get him.
Okay, go ahead, Rosie.
Then he went about among the villages teaching. He called the 12 and began to send them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over unclean spirits. He ordered them to take nothing for their journey except a staff, no bread, no bag, no money in their belts, but to wear sandals and to not put on 2 tunics. He said to them, wherever you enter a house, stay there until you leave the place. If any place will not welcome you and they refuse to hear you, as you leave, shake off the dust that is on your feet as a testimony against them. So they went out and proclaimed that all should repent. They cast out many demons and anointed with oil many who were sick and cured them.
Thank you, Rosie. So I think it's helpful to hear this episode next to, over against what we just heard in Nazareth. What do you notice about the mission of the 12? What strikes you as you listen to Rosie read?
Well, he's kind of almost sending them out naked.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're totally at the mercy of the householder. And he's asking them to be pretty forceful. Like, when you go in there, don't leave until you're done, till you're ready to go. I mean, don't come and go and come and go. You got to go and stay, and you've got to, I guess, keep at them until they either come around or they kick you out.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it would be really tough. I mean, he doesn't say, pack a lunch, because if they don't feed you, you got to leave and eat your lunch. You're at their mercy.
Beautiful.
2 things. A minor point. I had heard about a commentary on they stay there until you leave that place as being a question of manners. Don't keep jumping around from house to house for better food or better lodging. That is insulting. So that may or may not be written in there. But I have heard that commentary. I think I heard it at VTS, so it must have been right.
Well, of course.
But in verse 7, he specifically says that he gave them authority over the unclean spirits, and there isn't another charge there except authority over the unclean spirits. He's not saying go out and heal, go out and preach, go out and specifically. I mean, maybe that's all happening, but that seems to be a primary focus.
Beautiful. And and I think John had to jump off, but I'm thinking about what John was saying last week. We were talking about the apocalyptic nature of Mark's gospel, and that the rightful king is coming and is going to drive out the enemy, the evil one, whether you understand that as Satan, whether you understand that as Rome. So there's this clash of powers. And so it's like the disciples are, being recruited as part of that mission, that they now are given that authority to help push Rome to the edge of the cliff, as it were. Like the evil spirits that went into the pigs last week.
Is it plausible that sending the 12 out were what we would call an advance team to soften up the territory? Cast out the spirits that get in the way of the message. I don't see anything in there that says that directly, but
I'll say something about that in just a second. Ellie, you wanted to say something?
I was just thinking that there must be an awful lot of unclean spirits in that area if he has to send out 6 teams to deal with them. But I think Ray's right that it's unclean spirits. I mean, maybe not just clinically demented people, but I think to soften them up, to clean out the negativity of against the resistance against his teaching, soften people up.
I'm reminded of when Randy and I were living at Lambeth Palace a gajillion years ago, when we were working for the Archbishop. And the year was 2000. And so as part of the millennium, Prince Charles was coming to the palace to make an official state visit to the palace and to the chapel at Lambeth, which had just been renovated and was being reopened. And, the advance team came, and with the bomb sniffing dogs and the whole bit. And of course I experienced this at St. Andrews too when Barron was a student with the Secret Service. But what you just said, Ray, reminded me, so I got this visceral and visual image of that, just kind of clearing out the territory, sniffing around, seeing what's out there. Is this a safe place? And like you, I don't know if that's part of what's being said here, but it makes sense to me. That this advance team needs to go and do this work ahead of time. Why did they go 2 by 2?
Because that's the way Mormon missionaries do it.
Well, yeah. Good answer.
Well, I think it's an accountability thing. Because if you've got 2 people, and then if you've only got one, you could say the heck with this and just go off under a tree or something. With them, you have your mission and you're holding each other accountable to do it. It's a support system.
Yeah.
And it's a safety issue.
Beautiful.
Amy Jo Levine says it has something to do with Deuteronomy, but I can't figure out what.
Yeah, hang on one sec. Deuteronomy 17:6. I will take us there. On the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses, the death sentence shall be executed. A person must not be put to death in the evidence of only 1 witness. So the idea, I guess I hear that to say that in Torah, that anything that is going to happen needs, maybe it's about accountability, it's an eyewitness, you need documentation. And attestation of this. And so there's something about this mission that Jesus wants to make sure that, especially if there's shake the dust as testimony against them. If you're going to do that, We want to make sure there's somebody else watching and verifying this.
On a practical level, if you have ever done team teaching,
Mm-hmm.
or sometimes you need, no matter how good you are, you need sometimes somebody else to step in and give you a moment to think with a tough question,
Mm-hmm.
or a viewpoint coming from the audience, and or to have a supplementary viewpoint there. We often do that. Some people say this, some people say that. I mean, we do it all the time in this forum.
Yep. And I'm
But we're
thinking
both on the same frequency, although we're looking at it differently.
beautiful. And I'm thinking about you and Sue team teaching in South Africa.
Yes, that was.
Yeah, yeah. And so having the backup and at the same time having the slightly different perspective. So it's
Yes.
beyond just the individual myopia, right? I've got my blinders on. This is my experience, but it's bigger than that.
It's just a different set of eyes. As a production editor, I could never give a manuscript to someone to proofread if they'd copy edited it also.
Mm-hmm.
I always had somebody different proofread what anybody did.
Because we don't see our own
Two
mistake.
sets of eyes.
Yep. Beautiful. Beautiful. And I wonder if there's some connection, maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but I'm just thinking about it as we talk, to what, I guess it was you, Rosie, who was talking about this in the previous paragraph, that there needs to be the agreement of the recipient of healing in order for that to happen. So once again, it's not just one person, even Jesus on his own, but it's a conversation, it's a dialogue, it's a partnership, which of course is a beautiful model, and that's the way we're called to do ministry. And we sometimes get ourselves in trouble when we go off by ourselves to do our own thing. Anything else that strikes you there you want to look at more deeply? What do you think about that command in verse 11? If any place will not welcome you, and they refuse to hear you, shake off the dust on your feet. How do you experience that? How do you hear that?
For me, and I'm jumping right to our current context where we have places where we don't hear each other, won't hear each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me that if they refuse to hear you and you keep pounding on it, you're only making the situation worse.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems like very practical advice. It isn't hatred, but it is, fine, don't take the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to talk about it anymore. There are other things to talk about.
And don't take the dust with you. Just leave it behind.
Yeah.
Ah, lovely.
Yeah. I'm not taking anything
done.
from you. Yeah.
Oftentimes easier said than done. And I'm thinking, especially as you were saying about our current context, the temptation is just to keep banging our heads against the wall and say, no, it's this way. And, why won't you listen? And why are you being so stubborn and pigheaded? And at some point, I hear Jesus, it's a call to good stewardship, right? It's like, okay, you've got limited resources. Life is short. Time is short. And clearly there's some urgency here. If he's sending them out, with no bread and all of this, just go now.
Mm-hmm.
And don't hang around. Don't waste your time on folks who, would benefit from your message, but are making a choice not to hear you.
And don't take the anger with you when you leave.
Good point.
That's the hardest part, probably.
If I go back to verse 8, this issue I have been mulling in a slightly different context, but if they take nothing with them on their journey, not even bread, they are kindling a situation where sharing is the way of life, and that's the model that we exist because of each other and the support of each other. We continue to exist and we bond. I mean, And at the root of our version of Christianity, a shared meal, for instance, is the great bonding experience.
Beautiful.
If you can trust someone, a stranger, to feed you, then they're already receptive to you.
Yes.
There's a link.
They're invested.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful.
Well, I'm always so unaccepting of the miracles and the demons, and I'm just grasping at if what they could stand in for, if they were literal. Is that what they are? A team of like demon hunters, ghostbusters? I mean, it doesn't sound very good to me. I mean,
Perfect.
Are these demons some moral failings that are in them that are being cast out? I don't know. I'd like to think so, because I mean, this is like all those swine running into the Sea of Galilee. Lake. Yeah.
Love that. Love that.
The Ghostbuster image is just perfect, Donna. I love it. Got the visual of the slime and the whole bit.
Yeah.
Well, what do you all think? Donna raises a great question.
Just a further question on that. Is there a distinction between demons and unclean spirits in general? Or are they the same?
Let's look at the Greek specifically. I think we tend to, I'll speak for myself, I tend to hear them as synonymous, but let's make sure. Okay, so unclean spirits. Okay. Not clean. In a moral sense, unclean and thought and life. And then let's see how demons may be a different Greek word. But I wonder if it means basically the same thing. Yeah. Okay.
So I think the first term.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Ellie.
I think the first term implies more what Ray was saying, was that not the unclean spirits of demons and enchanted people, but negativity, unwillingness, not lack of openness to the message. So they're just clearing the weeds a little bit.
Yeah, demon seems to be more personified, more
specific.
Yeah. I mean, I always joke about having, a nose demon or a throat demon when something is wrong. There's a specific thing. But I've met a lot of unclean spirits in my time.
They weren't demons necessarily.
Oh, that was the transmitter. That's the vector.
Well, then, if we think about it, as two separate entities or categories, so they have authority over those unclean spirits, that negativity, and they are able literally to cast out demons. And, by the way, anoint with oil, and anyone can anoint, but they were able to cure them, the people who were sick. So what do you make about all of that?
Well, it sounds like what I was positing earlier is, maybe their charge was a lot more than was said in that first line. Gave them authority over unclean spirits. It seems there's more.
And then they could do whatever they were able to do for the people that they were talking to.
Good point.
It seems maybe either Jesus gave them the authority, or their faith allowed them to assume the authority.
Good.
And you just went exactly where I was going too, Donna, that recently, and we'll do it again this coming Sunday in church, we've been doing a lot of commissioning of various groups. We commissioned Sue, We sent Jessica off. This week we'll be commissioning our cantor and maybe our tending our soil team. And that's what we do as a body of faithful people, as we come together in prayer and invoke the Holy Spirit to set this person or these people apart for a particular ministry, right? And so that authority that the word that Mark uses, authority, isn't inherent in them. It's given to them and then they have to claim it, right? Because you can be given something and choose not to use it. It can just sit on the shelf. Clearly, they are claiming that authority that comes from Jesus, that, yeah, Jesus has said we can do this, and P.S., we're going to go do it, and then some. So it's not passive, I guess, is what I'm saying, is that yes, Jesus commissions them, he sends them out, he gives this gift to them, and if they chose not to use it, then nothing would happen.
But they did use it.
They did use it, exactly.
And they were probably able to accomplish more than they thought they could.
Exactly. I bet that's right. I bet they surprised themselves. Just like Jesus was amazed up above, I bet they were probably pretty amazed too. Like, whoa, what just happened?
Could we look at the word repent there?
Sure.
To us, I think it has a connotation of repent for sins. I wonder if it also could be changing a view or changing a worldview. Think about things differently.
Metanoia. Yeah, there you go.
Metanoia.
Yep, there we go. To change one's mind.
Yeah.
Or to change one's mind for better, heartily to amend with abhorrence of one's past sins. So, yeah, I mean, repent, we tend to think of, when we hear that word, the browbeating and mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. But it's more than that, right? It's, yes, saying you're sorry, and changing your point of view, your worldview.
Well, the Latin root of the word repent is to rethink, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly.
Perfect for Yom Kippur, isn't it?
Beautiful. Beautiful. Exactly.
Thanks.
Well, thank you for asking the question.
Well,
anything else about the mission of the 12?
When were they supposed to come back?
When were they supposed to come back?
Yeah, I mean, how long of a mission was this?
Good question.
Good question.
Yeah, especially if they're going out without bread and a tunic and money and yeah. Is this the long haul?
Oh, as we read along, let's see when he has the disciples around him again.
Exactly. All right, this will probably be where we stop today. Would someone like to read these 2 paragraphs for us about the death of John the Baptist? A story that we probably know well. Would someone read these paragraphs for us?
I guess it's my turn.
Oh,
unless Donna wants to.
Go for it.
King Herod heard of it, for Jesus' name had become known. Some were saying, John the Baptizer has been raised from the dead, and for this reason these powers are at work in him. But others said, it is Elijah. And others said, it is a prophet, like one of the prophets of old. But when Herod heard of it, he said, John, whom I beheaded, has been raised. For Herod himself had sent men who arrested John, bound him, and put him in prison on account of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because Herod had married her. For John had been telling Herod, it is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. And Herodias had a grudge against him and wanted to kill him. But she could not, for Herod feared John, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man, and he protected him. When he heard him, he was greatly perplexed, and yet he liked to listen to him. But an opportunity came when Herod, on his birthday, gave a banquet for his courtiers and officers, and for the leaders of Galilee. When his daughter Herodias came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his guests. And the king said to the girl, "Ask me for whatever you wish, and I will give it." And he solemnly swore to her, "Whatever you ask me, I will give you, even half of my kingdom." She went out and said to her mother, "What should I ask for?" I lost my trace.
Here you
She
go.
replied, "The head of John the Baptizer." Immediately she rushed back to the king and requested, "I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter." The king was deeply grieved, yet out of regard for his oaths and for the guests, he did not want to refuse her. Immediately the king sent a soldier of the guard with orders to bring John's head. He went and beheaded him in the prison, brought his head on a platter, and gave it to the girl. Then the girl gave it to her mother. When the disciples heard about it, they came and took his body and laid it in a tomb.
Thank you, Ellie. Just want to go up to this. Just to clarify, because it's confusing at verse 22 where it says where his daughter Herodias, because Herodias is his wife. You see other ancient authorities read the daughter of Herodias herself. And other versions of the story will say is Salome. So I just invite us not to get too hung up on names here, but we get the gist of the story. So what do you hear? I mean, again, that's probably a familiar story to a lot of folks. Did you notice anything that you hadn't noticed before or wonder about anything?
The best thing I've ever heard about Herod was that he liked to listen to John the Baptist, even though he didn't agree with him, and that and kept him alive so he could do it.
Even though he's perplexed. I think that the idea of Herod being perplexed, but yes, I like to still likes to listen to him. Sounds good.
I think it's a wonderful story, and but to me the part that is kind of the sticking part is, why would a king promise such an extravagant gift after one dance?
He's probably pretty drunk.
Yeah. Had to be quite a dance too.
Right.
Or maybe dance was kind of metaphorical.
Yeah, I think that there's some connotation of it being salacious or provocative, and which is ew, this is your stepdaughter, yuck, and you figure it's his birthday and he's surrounded himself with all his sycophants, right? And so anyone who is pleasing to him, and to Ray's point, he's probably drunk out of his mind. There's this impulsive promise, and then he's kind of stuck, like, oh, I can't go back on my oath, so I better go through with it, even though I do like to listen to John the Baptist, and he does intrigue and perplex me. Just so we're clear here, I want to make sure we know which Herod we're talking about. So this is Herod Antipas, who is one of Herod the Great's sons, who rules over the Galilee area at this point, because Herod the Great would have died in 4 BCE. So this is the Herod who gets called in when Jesus goes before Pilate, and Pilate sends him to Herod. It's this Herod.
Was Herod a Jew?
Yeah. Great question. At least nominally.
Jewish mother, I think.
At least nominally. Didn't so much act faithfully much of the time. Ray, were you going to say something? I'm sorry.
No.
Oh. I saw somewhere, it might have been Amy Jill Levine who talks about, I think it was, who talks about that he, maybe it's not, somebody, maybe it was N.T. Wright, talked about him observing Passover, and, that Herod was at least, in some sense, Jewish, which had to have been complicating for him.
But he wasn't a Roman.
Well, he's appointed by the emperor,
Yeah.
And so represents the empire, but is himself Jewish, as was his father.
I think it was his mother who was Jewish.
Well, Herod the Great also was Jewish. That's
Oh, okay.
so.
Well,
But
yeah.
Herod Antipas's mother, I believe you're right, was Jewish.
He wouldn't be Jewish if it wasn't the mother.
Right.
Mhm.
So, for example, Herod Antipas, let me make this bigger, established the city or big town of Tiberias on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee. Tiberias named after the emperor Tiberius, but he he built the city on an old Jewish burial ground. So, no Jews would go there. And so, it's like he was Jewish, but he was always doing things that made him run afoul of the Jews, because he had this loyalty to the emperor. So I think that's just emblematic of his
So
sort of caught between two worlds.
which Herod was the one that the three wise men met?
Herod the Great.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I believe. Well, yeah. Again, yes, I'm pretty sure it would be Herod the Great, his father. Depending on when that actually happened, right? Because
Yeah, theoretically 30 years later.
Before, but it was so. Yeah, good question. Other things you notice about this story or wonder about, just as an aside, this is attested to in the writings of Josephus, the early historian. So we know that this did happen. And again, the slighter details might differ from one account to another, but we do know that Herod Antipas beheaded John the Baptist. What do you think about the fact that Herod assumes that it is John come back to life when he hears these stories about Jesus?
Well, what he has heard apparently was consistent with what he was hearing from John.
Mm-hmm. And I would imagine that if he does assume that it's John the Baptist, he's running a little scared because he chopped this man's head off, and here he is. If he thinks he's back, like, I'm in big trouble. So that must be playing with Herod's head a little bit, I would just say.
Why did he arrest John in the first place?
Good question.
Because John had been speaking out against his marriage to his brother's wife.
Oh, that's duh.
Yeah.
Right.
So, John was really embodying the role of prophet in that encounter, right? And, it reminds me a little bit of Nathan telling King David, you're the one who killed Uriah because of your lust for Bathsheba. You're the man. It's kind of like that. John saying, hello, you shouldn't be doing this. Torah prohibits this. And if you are Jewish, you're really not, living the life you're supposed to.
Right. Yeah.
So, but his response is to throw him in prison. Also makes me think of, the story of Joseph and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat in Genesis, that Joseph gets thrown into prison for speaking out and for saying things that are not, are not very popular, and he gets set up by Potiphar's wife. And so we get these similar themes of, the one who speaks out getting imprisoned. Anything else here? Because we should probably quit at this point rather than to try to finish Mark 6. Well, what I'll do is I'll confirm which Herod it was who encountered the wise men in the palace and then supposedly slaughtered the innocents. I think it was Herod the Great, but I want to make sure because I get confused with all the Herods. But I'll answer that question to the best of my ability.
This Herod does sound a little less vicious than that.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully so. All right. Anything else, friends?
Oh, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next week we'll pick up with the feeding of the 5,000 and Jesus walking on the water, and we'll go forward from there.
Thank
All
you.
right. I'll
Thank
see
you.
some of you soon. Be well, and thank you for a great hour as always.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.